Prize, the only reformer among 6 candidates in Iran's presidential election, the first round winner. How much of a reformer, though? 64-year-old Hassan Rouhani, seen here on Sunday, visiting Ayatollah Khomeini's shrine after the vote. He's a multilingual cleric who once headed Iran's nuclear negotiating team. But is he his own man? The final say in Iran still goes to the supreme leader, conservative Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Is Rouhani's win a slap in the face for the clerics or a victory in disguise, restoring a measure of credibility to a system challenged by the unprecedented post-electoral protests we saw 4 years ago? The specter of 2009, by the way, inviting itself to Rouhani's first press conference Monday, suddenly cut short when a cry in favor of then-candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi rang out. Mousavi, who is still under house arrest, when person shouted out that ended the press conference in confusion. Now, as a G8 summit convenes in Northern Ireland, we're going to be looking at the West's initial reactions to the changing of the guard in Tehran. Today in the France 24 debate, Iran, change you can believe in? With us to talk about it, Iranian journalist Mohammad Reza Yazdanpanah. Welcome to the France 24 debate. You're now based here in Paris for the time being. You were imprisoned after the last vote in 2009 during the so-called Green Revolution. His books include President Obama and Iran. Raymond Tanter, a former member of the U.S. National Security Council under George W. Bush. Welcome to the France 24 debate.
My pleasure.
Joining us shortly from Tel Aviv will be Meir Javan-Danfar, who teaches at Herzliya University, co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Iran about Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. And from Denver, Colorado, Nader Hashemi, director of the Center of Middle East Studies at the University of Denver. His books include The People Reloaded, The Green Movement, and The Struggle for Iran's Future. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Mohammad Reza Yazdanpanah, first of all, were you surprised?
Yeah, I was sure. Exactly, because me as a journalist, I was expected that the next president of Iran after Ahmadinejad is not a moderate people, a moderate clergy, or somebody who is in relation, very close relation with some people like Hashemi Rafsanjani and Mohammad Khatami. I believe that Mr. Saeed Jalili is the next president of Iran. And with this result, and with when I heard about that, and I wrote that Mr. Rouhani is the new president of Iran, I was really shocked.
Really shocked? Does that restore your faith in Iran's political system?
Yes, because in last 8 years, especially in last 8 years, the government moved, the state and regime moved to be really totalitarian and fundamentalist government. But with this result, this process is finished right now, I think.
Pleasant surprise for you as well, Raymond Tanter?
Not at all. I'm not surprised. I'm shocked that my colleague is surprised. Why? Because the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, a week or so before the election, said we're going to have election engineering. And then Supreme Leader Khamenei said, let's not use that word. 2009, what happened? The Ahmadinejad was reelected, quote unquote, reelected. The people hit the street. This time, the people hit the street in celebration of a so-called moderate. He's not a moderate. He's the man who was for 16 years secretary of the Assembly of Clerics. He was approved by the Guardian Council. He is a man who is the only cleric in the mix. He's a confidant of Khamenei. So therefore, I'm not surprised that this has happened. If Khamenei wanted to remove the other so-called conservatives from the race, he would have increased the chance that one of the conservatives would have won, not Rouhani. But Rouhani himself is a conservative. So I think that Khamenei is toasting, along with the others, that the regime has won a tremendous victory. Internally, there's no need to have demonstrations. Externally, the peace camps will break out all over. give peace a chance. They will sing come by ya, my love, and all of that kind of thing. So I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked.
Meyer Javandavfar, do you agree that the dice were loaded in favor of Rouhani?
I believe respectfully the exact opposite. I'm much like my friend Mr. Yazdan Panah. I was also surprised. I was under the impression that it's either probably going to Mr. Qalibaf because he's got more domestic project management and domestic politics skills than Mr. Jalili, but we saw both of us were proven wrong, and Mr. Rouhani won. And I think this was due to one group of people and a single person showing basically being pulled and pushed. The people of Iran pushed after the 2009 elections, which in my honest opinion, I believe were fraudulent. I think the regime listened to the people of Iran because it's looking around what's happening in the region. You know, it's one thing to falsify elections in 2009. It's another thing to falsify elections in 2013 after we've had uprising in numerous Arab countries and on the home soil of Iran's big ally, Syria. So I think, we're looking at a different Middle East, and I think the regime is looking at that. We're also looking at the sanctions and the fact that it's very difficult for the regime to continue with those without having some kind of a rapprochement with the West, and I think that was also noted. So we had on the one way people of Iran pushed, and on the other way, Ayatollah Khamenei was pulled into this. I don't think he willingly and enthusiastically allowed these elections to be ones where the votes are actually counted. I think the fact that he allowed these votes to be counted, votes for Mr. Rouhani to be counted, instead of engineering them this time, which he could have done, is because he sees that the regime is going into direction that's actually could endanger its future. And he's hoping that perhaps with Mr. Rouhani, he can improve the state of the economy because Mr. Rouhani is very well respected abroad. He can use his clout to improve the economy, to pull Iran out of sanctions, but whether Mr. Rouhani is going to improve human rights in Iran and improve the position of women, I'm not so optimistic. He's going to have bigger priorities such as the economy.
All right, we'll get back to that issue of the economy in a while. Nader Hashemi, again, for people who don't follow Iran closely, what does it say about democracy in Iran or multi-party rule?
Well, I think what it says is that the voice of the people actually can play a difference in determining the outcome of elections, even if those elections are very unfree and are very skewed in the direction of candidates that are favored by the regime. But if people pour out into the streets in large numbers, cast their ballots, they can complicate the plans and the designs and the wishes of ruling elites in Iran. And so I agree with what was just said by two of the previous members of this discussion. I think most people are surprised by this result. If you look up, if you analyze the events leading up to the election, everything was sort of, the stage was set to sort of have a candidate that was a loyalist and a devotee and an ideologue of the supreme leader win these elections. The only candidate that provided somewhat of a contrast and in fact ran on a platform, a reformist platform, even though he comes out of a sort of centrist, conservative, centrist, pragmatist background, but he ran on a platform of a change in the status quo, greater freedoms internally for young people, for women, and a change in Iran's international isolation and a call for reconciliation and peace on a global level. That candidate was the one who won the election, and it's largely because I think of an outpouring of support for that candidate in the last few days of the election, which I think has shocked many constituencies. First and foremost, the ruling establishment in Iran. It's also shocked a lot of people inside the country, demonstrating that their voice actually matters. And it's also shocked a lot of people, I think, in different parts of the world who, didn't believe that the voice of the people actually mattered in Iran. And I think we've seen that it actually does. Not in a way that's going to transit to democracy, but it can complicate the plans of of ruling elites to sort of to stage manage these elections.
To stage manage the elections, you heard Raymond Tanter a moment ago say that the peace camp, beware, you could be duped by what's going on. Both France and the U.S. Cautiously offering dialogue, and Israel's president upbeat after the vote.
He says he will not go for these extreme policies. I'm not sure that he specified what will be his policies, but it will be better, I am sure, and that is the reason why the people voted for him.
All right, that's Israel's president. Israel's prime minister, well, a different story. It's not change Benjamin Netanyahu seems to believe in.
And Iran's ruler, the so-called supreme leader, is the one who determines the nuclear policy and not the president. The more pressure exerted on Iran, the greater the chances to bring an end to Iran's nuclear weapons program.
Meir Javandanfar, who's right in this argument? Shimon Peres, who sees perhaps a sliver of daylight, or Benjamin Netanyahu, who says, well, it's not the president in Iran who makes the important decisions?
Two words, Shimon Peres.
All right, Raymond Tanter?
Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is correct. I know both men, and my view is that the peace camp has already broken out in this debate, making statements that imply that this is not the time to enhance the sanctions. This is not the time for demanding a quick response from the Iranian regime. Give Rouhani time to consolidate. In fact, give him some concessions. Begin to preemptorily reduce some of the sanctions in order to show the so-called hardliners that he can produce the goods. Rouhani accepts the Constitution, which says that the supreme leader is the supreme leader. They all accepted the Constitution.
All right, Mohammad Reza Yazdanpada. Excuse me?
To be running the elections. It's impossible for Khamenei to allow somebody who doesn't accept the constitution to be allowed to run in the elections. We all wanted democratic Iran, but I think the expectation that Mr. Rouhani is going to reject the supreme leader and reject the constitution, yet be allowed to run, it's not within the realms of the reality which the Iranian regime operates in.
Raymond Tanzer?
He's absolutely correct. So therefore, it's not an election, it's a selection by the supreme leader. But more to the point, people will say this is not the time to push ahead with more sanctions. This is the time to reduce the pressure. And Rouhani has already bragged that once pressure had been reduced before, he was able to, with his colleagues, build up the nuclear infrastructure of Iran with respect to such things as detonator research and the like.
All right.
He never said detonator research.
Iran.
He never said detonator research. I'm sorry.
Meir Javandanfar, very briefly.
Sorry. I agree that he said that Iran's nuclear program had made research. It had made progress in terms of centrifuges and nuclear cycle fuel cycle, but he never said detonator. And at that time, the transparency that we had with Iran was much better.
Mohammad Reza Yazdanpada, when we were preparing for the show today, a lot of people are saying, well, what we accept now as a reformer is not what you would have accepted as a reformer just a few years ago. So, Hassan Rouhani, is he really a reformer?
No, even himself, he doesn't say that. He never, Hassan Rouhani, he never presents himself as a reformist people. He just says, I'm a moderate people. I'm a moderate, and I'm ready to collaborate with reformist people. But he's not reformist. He has promised some reformist promises, some reformist things, but he's not reformist. I think that the main reason that the people of Iran right now, the mass of people of Iran elects Mr. Rouhani is that they were tired from the international sanctions against Iran, about the recession in Iran. They were tired, and Ahmadinejad, he was not dignity of Iranian people.
So it's an anti-Ahmadinejad vote to a certain degree, in your view. Iran with a system, again, where the clerics do have final say. There's a track record, though, in the past of moderates getting, well, undermined by the supreme leader. Thomas Waterhouse explains.
Despite winning Friday's presidential vote, constitutionally, Hassan Rouhani will never have total control. In power for 24 years, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei remains the supreme leader of the revolution. Seen as a defiant dictator in the West, the US is often the victim of his acid tongue, most recently as he cast his ballot in elections.
Recently, I heard that someone from America's National Security Council said that they don't consider Iran's elections to be fair and valid. Okay, to hell with you then.
With the final say over the army, police, the justice system, and importantly, Iran's controversial nuclear program, time after time, his all-powerful and sometimes hidden hand has thwarted the reformist desires of presidents that have come and gone. Under Mohammad Khatami's presidency, Parliament attempted to liberalise the press, but the supreme leader stepped in, sending a letter to ministers ordering an end to the debate, and consequently an end to the reformist desires of the president. In 2009, he was accused of being behind the alleged electoral fraud that saw his preferred man, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, return to power. Thousands turned out in protest, but the Ayatollah stood firm once again.
They should not imagine that with such a weak copy of the huge mobilization of people during the Islamic Revolution in 1979, in copying this revolution, they can harm the glory of the Islamic Republic and its system.
For all his grand plans for political openness and better links with the West, it remains to be seen how many of Rouhani's electoral promises will see the light of day, with the Ayatollah's hand still firmly on the controls.
Just very briefly, Nader Hashami, because we're going to have to go to the break. How firmly is it in the hands of Ayatollah Khamenei?
It's very firmly. I agree with that report that you just played. I mean, regardless of who the president in Iran is, final decisions are made in the office of the supreme leader. And at the very core of this regime, there is, I would say, a very deep fascistic element that doesn't really care about popular elections and who wins the presidency. And so Rouhani can sort of say what he wants, but when he tries to push too far, he's going to find himself meeting stiff resistance in the same way that Mohammad Khatami did during the 2 terms when he was president. So I think, there's no way of getting around this core element of Iranian politics.
All right, and we'll pick up on that point when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.